I was 72 years old when the phone rang. A stranger's voice said, "Ma'am, I found something that belongs to you." I had no idea what he meant. Then he described it. A gold wedding band with an inscription inside. Robert and Linda, forever. June 1973. My hand flew to my throat. That ring. The ring I lost in the ocean 47 years ago. The ring I wore for only 3 months before the waves took it. The ring from the husband I lost not long after. The diver said he found it buried in the sand off the California coast. 47 years underwater, and somehow it found its way back to me. But getting the ring back meant facing a past I'd buried deeper than any ocean. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below to find out how this incredible journey ends. Before I was 72 with arthritis in my knees and reading glasses perched on my nose, I was 25 and beautiful. At least that's what Robert told me every morning when we woke up together. We met at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where I was studying to become an elementary school teacher, and he was finishing his engineering degree. Our eyes locked across the university library one rainy February evening in 1971, and by March, we were inseparable. Robert had sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead no matter how many times he pushed it back. His eyes were the exact color of the Pacific on a clear day, that impossible blue that makes you believe in magic. He had a quiet confidence about him, never needing to be the loudest voice in the room, but always the one people gravitated toward. He made me laugh until my sides hurt, and when he kissed me for the first time under the Santa Barbara pier with waves crashing around us, I knew I'd found my forever. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It wasn't elaborate or showy, just the two of us on the same beach where we'd had our first kiss. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and got down on one knee as the sun was setting. "Linda," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "you're the first person I want to see every morning and the last person I want to see every night. Will you marry me?" I couldn't even speak through my tears. I just nodded and fell into his arms as he slid the ring onto my finger. We were married on June 18th, 1973, in a small ceremony at my parents' backyard in Santa Barbara. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered slightly to fit my frame. Robert cried when he saw me walking down the makeshift aisle, and my father had to squeeze his arm to remind him to breathe. We wrote our own vows, promising to love each other forever, a word that seemed so infinite and attainable then. Robert had surprised me by having our rings engraved. Robert and Linda forever, June 1973. It was perfect. I had just landed my first teaching job at an elementary school in Santa Monica, and Robert had been hired by an engineering firm in Los Angeles. We found a small apartment halfway between our workplaces. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Weekends were spent furnishing our little home, cooking together, and walking on the beach. We were young, in love, and convinced we had our whole lives ahead of us. Nothing could touch us. For our honeymoon, we spent 2 weeks driving up the California coast, stopping at every beach along the way. We collected seashells, drank wine on balconies overlooking the ocean, and made love with the sound of waves in the background. I remember thinking life could never be more perfect than it was in those moments. 3 months after our wedding, in September of 1973, we returned to Malibu Beach, our favorite spot and where Robert had proposed. The day was unusually warm for September, the kind of day that fools you into believing summer will never end. We spread our blanket on the sand and ran into the waves together, laughing as the cold water hit our skin. I remember every detail of that day with the strange clarity that comes with trauma. The sky was cloudless, bright blue. The waves were stronger than usual. The lifeguard had put up yellow caution flags. Robert and I were strong swimmers, though, and we ventured out farther than the other beachgoers. We were jumping over waves, splashing each other, stealing kisses between swells. Then a wave came that was bigger than the rest. I saw it building in the distance, and Robert called out, "This is going to be a big one." We decided to dive under it rather than try to jump over it. I took a deep breath and plunged beneath the surface just as the wave crashed above me. The force of it tumbled me underwater, spinning me around until I didn't know which way was up. When I finally surfaced, gasping for air, I instinctively wiped the salt water from my eyes. That's when I felt it. Or rather, didn't feel it. My wedding ring was gone. The gold band that had only been on my finger for 3 months had slipped off in the churning water. I screamed Robert's name in panic, and he swam to me immediately, concern etched on his face. "My ring," I cried. "It slipped off in the wave." Without hesitation, Robert dove under the water. I joined him, both of us feeling blindly through the sand beneath us, desperate to find the small gold circle that symbolized our commitment to each other. We took turns diving down, searching until our lungs burned and our fingers were numb from sifting through the coarse sand. Other beachgoers joined the search when they realized what had happened, but after an hour of looking, it became clear. The ocean had claimed my wedding ring. I sat on the shore and sobbed as if I'd lost Robert himself. He held me, stroking my hair, whispering that it was just a ring, that it didn't change anything between us, that we could get another one. "What matters is us," he said, "not a piece of metal." But to me, it felt like a terrible omen, as if the sea had intentionally taken something precious from me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something worse was coming. I had no idea how right I was. 2 months after losing the ring, I lost Robert. It was a rainy evening in November of 1973. He was working late at the office, finishing up a project before the Thanksgiving holiday. We had plans to drive to my parents' house the next morning. I had already packed our bags and was preparing a late dinner for when he got home. He called around 7 to say he was leaving the office soon. "I miss you," he said. "See you in 30 minutes. I love you." Those were the last words he ever said to me. The roads were slick with rain. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the center line on the Pacific Coast Highway. They told me Robert died instantly in the head-on collision. I was a widow at 25. We had been married for exactly 5 months, and one day, I buried my husband without my wedding ring. The funeral passed in a blur. I remember standing by his casket, staring at his peaceful face, unable to comprehend that the vibrant, loving man I'd married was gone. His parents flew in from Chicago, broken by the loss of their only son. My family surrounded me, but I felt completely alone. The only person who could have comforted me was lying in that casket. I moved back in with my parents after the funeral. I couldn't bear to be in our apartment alone, surrounded by the furniture we'd picked out together, the photographs of our wedding, the coffee mugs still paired in the cabinet. My father and brother packed everything up weeks later. Most of it went into storage. I couldn't face giving away Robert's things, but I couldn't look at them either. I took a leave of absence from teaching. The thought of facing a classroom full of children with their whole lives ahead of them was more than I could bear. I barely left my childhood bedroom for 3 months. My mother would bring me food that I rarely ate. My father would sit silently at the foot of my bed, not knowing what to say, but unwilling to leave me completely alone. The loss of the ring seemed prophetic now. I tortured myself thinking about it. If only I'd been more careful. If only I'd taken it off before swimming. If only we'd gone to a different beach that day. As irrational as it was, I couldn't help believing that losing the ring had somehow caused Robert's death, that the universe had been giving me a warning I failed to heed. By spring, I forced myself to start living again, if only because I knew Robert would have wanted me to. I went back to teaching, throwing myself into my work. I found a small apartment in Santa Monica, not far from the school where I taught 3rd grade. I made myself get up every morning, shower, dress, and face a world without Robert in it. The years immediately after were the hardest. Every holiday, every anniversary, every milestone was a fresh wound. June brought the anniversary of our wedding. September reminded me of the lost ring. November was the hardest. The anniversary of his death coming right before Thanksgiving, a holiday that never felt thankful again. 5 years after Robert's death, I met Thomas. He was the father of one of my students. A single dad raising a daughter on his own after his wife abandoned them. We connected over our shared experience of loss, though his was different from mine. He was kind, stable, and patient with my grief. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I said yes, though a part of me felt like I was betraying Robert. Thomas knew about Robert, knew he would always occupy a piece of my heart that no one else could touch. He accepted that, and we built a life together that was comfortable, if never quite as passionate as what I'd had with Robert. Thomas was a good man who loved me, and I loved him in return, even if it was a different kind of love than what I'd felt before. We had 2 children together, a son, Michael, and a daughter, Sarah. They brought joy back into my life in a way I hadn't thought possible after Robert died. Watching them grow, teaching them to ride bikes and read books and navigate the complexities of life, gave me purpose. Thomas was a wonderful father, and we built a solid family together, but our marriage was never quite what it should have been. The ghost of Robert stood between us, not because I talked about him, but because I didn't. I kept those memories locked away so tightly that they created a part of me Thomas could never access. He never complained, never asked me to love him the way I'd loved Robert. Perhaps he knew it was impossible. After 20 years of marriage, Thomas and I drifted apart. The divorce was amicable, no dramatic fights or bitter custody battles. We simply acknowledged that while we'd built a life together and raised 2 amazing children, we weren't making each other happy anymore. He moved to San Diego and I kept our house in Santa Monica. We remained friends, better at that than we ever were at being husband and wife. My children grew up and moved away. Michael to Seattle for a job in technology, Sarah to Boston for medical school. I retired from teaching after 35 years, leaving behind a career that had sustained me through my darkest days. I filled my retirement with volunteer work, book clubs, and visits to my children and eventually my grandchildren. As the decades passed, I thought about Robert and the ring less frequently. The pain dulled to a familiar ache that I carried with me, like an old injury that only hurts when it rains. I had built a full life, not the one I'd planned with Robert, but a life with meaning and connection nonetheless. I had loved. I had lost. I had survived. By 2020, I was 72 years old, living alone in a small house near the beach in Santa Monica. My hair had turned silver, my face mapped with the lines of 72 years of laughter and tears. I had 4 grandchildren who visited during school breaks, bringing noise and energy to my quiet home. I had a routine: morning walks on the beach, coffee with friends at the local cafe, volunteer work at the library, phone calls with my children. I had made peace with my past, or so I thought. Robert had been dead for 47 years, longer than I'd known him, longer than he'd been alive. The ring had been at the bottom of the ocean all that time, presumably buried under decades of sand and salt, forgotten by everyone except me. And even I had stopped actively thinking about it, relegated it to the background noise of my life, a story I occasionally told to close friends after a few glasses of wine. I never expected to see it again. It was a Tuesday morning in April 2020. I remember because it was during the early days of the pandemic lockdowns, and I'd been mostly isolated in my house for weeks. The world outside felt dangerous and uncertain, and I was one of those vulnerable older adults everyone was worried about. My children called daily, checking to make sure I was eating properly and not taking unnecessary risks. Friends dropped groceries on my porch, waving from a safe distance. The phone rang as I was watering my houseplants, one of the few living things I could safely interact with. I didn't recognize the number on my caller ID, but during those lonely days, I answered every call, grateful for any human connection. "Hello?" I said, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I poured water into a potted fern. "Is this Linda Calloway?" a young male voice asked. "Yes, it is," I replied, immediately wondering if it was a telemarketer or perhaps something about my grandchildren. "My name is Jake Peterson. I'm a scuba diver." He paused as if that explained everything. "I found something that I think belongs to you." I set down my watering can, confused. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I haven't lost anything recently." He chuckled softly. "No, not recently. I think you lost it a long time ago. Does the date June 1973 mean anything to you?" My heart skipped a beat. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Yes," I whispered. "That's when I got married." "And your husband's name was Robert?" My hand flew to my throat. "Yes, Robert Calloway. Mrs. Calloway, I found a wedding ring while diving off Malibu Beach. It's a gold band with an inscription inside that says Robert and Linda. Forever, June 1973. I've been trying to find the owner for weeks. I finally found a record of your marriage in 1973 and tracked you down through social media. Your daughter Sarah has quite a few pictures with you on her Facebook page. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to process what he was saying. The ring, my ring, the one that slipped from my finger 47 years ago, was found. It seemed impossible, like something from a movie, not real life. Mrs. Calloway, are you still there? Yes, I managed, my voice barely audible. I'm in shock. I lost that ring in September of 1973 while swimming at Malibu Beach. It slipped off my finger during a big wave. That explains it, Jake said, excitement in his voice. I found it buried pretty deep in the sand about 50 yards from shore. I use an underwater metal detector. It's kind of a hobby of mine. I find all sorts of things, mostly junk, to be honest. Old coins, beer cans, fishing weights, but occasionally something special turns up. When I found your ring and saw the inscription, I knew it must mean a lot to someone. I had to try to find its owner. I can't believe it, I said, tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. After all these years. How is that possible? The ocean does strange things, Jake said. Items can be buried in the sand for decades and then suddenly uncovered by the right storm or tide. Gold doesn't corrode in salt water, so even after 47 years, the inscription was still readable once I cleaned it up a bit. I don't know what to say except thank you for going to all this trouble to find me. It was no trouble, he assured me. I love reuniting people with their lost items. It's why I do this. Would you like to have the ring back? The question caught me off guard. Did I want it back? This small circle of gold that represented the briefest, happiest time of my life, followed by the deepest grief. This object that had lived at the bottom of the ocean while I built an entire life without it. Without Robert. What would it mean to hold it again after 47 years? Yes, I heard myself say. Yes, I would. We arranged to meet once the lockdown restrictions eased. Jake lived in Malibu, not far from where he'd found the ring. I was only a short drive away in Santa Monica. We agreed to meet. In June, almost exactly 47 years after Robert and I had said our vows. After I hung up, I sat motionless in my chair for what felt like hours, staring out the window at the distant shimmer of the ocean. The same ocean that had taken my ring, and now, inexplicably, had given it back. I felt as if I were 25 again, standing on that beach in panic as the waves washed away my wedding band. All the emotions I thought I'd processed decades ago came flooding back. The loss, the grief, the questions about what might have been. Why now? Why after 47 years? What could it possibly mean that this ring had surfaced now, when I was 72 years old, a lifetime away from the young bride who had worn it? Was it just coincidence? Or was the universe trying to tell me something? I'd never been particularly spiritual or superstitious, but this felt meaningful in a way I couldn't articulate. I called Sarah that evening, needing to tell someone about this surreal turn of events. My daughter, practical and scientific like her father, like Thomas, not Robert, tried to reason through it. It's amazing, Mom, but it's not mystical, she said. The ocean floor shifts constantly. This diver happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right equipment. It's wonderful that you're getting the ring back, but don't read too much into it. I know you're right, I said, but it feels significant. 47 years, Sarah. That ring has been underwater for nearly half a century, and now it's coming back to me. Don't you think that means something? She was quiet for a moment. Maybe it means you get to have a piece of Dad back, she said softly. She always called Thomas Dad and Robert your first husband, maintaining the appropriate emotional distance from the man she'd never met, but whose absence had shaped her life nonetheless. Maybe, I agreed, though that didn't feel quite right. Robert wasn't in that ring. He wasn't anywhere except in my memories and in the few faded photographs I kept in an album on my bookshelf. After we hung up, I went to that bookshelf and pulled out the album I hadn't opened in years. There we were, Robert and I, young and glowing on our wedding day. his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something off camera. My left hand resting on his chest, the gold band clearly visible. I touched the image, tracing the outlines of our faces, wondering what Robert would think about the ring's return. Would he see it as meaningful? Or would he laugh in that carefree way of his and say it was just a piece of metal, nothing to get worked up about? Over the next weeks, as I waited for our meeting with Jake, I thought constantly about the ring. I dreamed about it almost every night, sometimes finding it myself in the sand, sometimes watching it sink deeper and deeper into dark water where I couldn't reach it. I found myself walking to the beach more often, standing at the edge of the Pacific, looking out at the endless blue and wondering if it had been holding onto my ring all these years, waiting for the right moment to return it. I wondered what I would feel when I held it again. Would it still feel like mine after all this time? Would it bring comfort or pain? And what would I do with it afterward? These questions circled in my mind like seagulls, never landing, never resolved. When June finally came, and the restrictions had eased enough for a careful outdoor meeting, I felt as nervous as if I were going on a first date. I spent far too much time deciding what to wear, settling on a simple blue dress that brought out my eyes that Robert once said matched the ocean. I drove to Malibu with my heart pounding, wondering if I was making a mistake, if some things from the past should stay there. But I kept driving, toward the beach, toward the ring, toward a piece of my history that had somehow found its way back to me. The beachside cafe where Jake and I agreed to meet overlooked the same stretch of Malibu Beach where I'd lost the ring 47 years earlier. I arrived early, choosing a table on the outdoor patio with a view of the ocean. The waves looked peaceful today, nothing like the choppy water of that September day in 1973. I ordered a coffee and waited, watching the surfers and the families playing on the sand below. When Jake walked up to my table, I recognized him immediately from the profile picture he'd sent me. He was in his mid-30s, tall with sun-bleached hair and the lean build of someone who spends a lot of time in the water. He wore shorts and a t-shirt with a diving company logo, casual but respectful. He smiled warmly as he approached. "Mrs. Calloway?" he asked, extending his hand. "Please call me Linda," I said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," he said, sitting across from me. "This is the part of the job I love most." I smiled. "Is this your job? Finding lost items?" "Not exactly," he explained. "I run a small diving school here in Malibu. The treasure hunting is more of a hobby, something I do on my days off. I've been fascinated with finding lost objects since I was a kid with a metal detector in my parents' backyard. Taking it underwater was a natural progression once I learned to dive." "How often do you find something like this?" I asked, gesturing to the pocket where I assumed he was keeping my ring. "Honestly, almost never," Jake admitted. "I find plenty of modern stuff, lost jewelry from last weekend, keys, phones and waterproof cases. But something this old that I can actually trace back to its owner? This might be a first." He pulled out his phone and showed me photographs of the ring as he'd found it. The first images showed a small circular shape almost entirely encrusted with sediment, barely recognizable as a ring at all. "This is how it looked when my detector first picked it up," he explained, swiping to the next photo. "It was buried under about 8 inches of sand in an area that doesn't see much human traffic. That's probably why it stayed in one place for so long." The next series of photos showed the cleaning process, Jake carefully removing years of oceanic buildup to reveal the gold underneath. In the final photo, the ring looked almost new, the gold shining brightly against his palm. "Gold is amazing," he said. "It doesn't corrode in salt water." Once I cleaned off all the buildup, the inscription was perfectly clear. That's when I knew I had to find the owner. "How did you find me?" I asked. genuinely curious about the detective work involved. It took some doing, Jake admitted. First, I searched public records for marriages between a Robert and Linda in June 1973 in the Los Angeles area. There were more than I expected. But then, I cross-referenced with addresses near Malibu, figuring you probably lived nearby if you were swimming here. That narrowed it down considerably. Then I searched social media for those names, looking for anyone who might be the right age. When I found your daughter's Facebook page with pictures of you and mentions of Santa Monica, I was pretty sure I had the right Linda. "Oh, that's impressive detective work," I said, touched by the effort he'd made. "I was motivated," he smiled. "Finding something this old with such a clear connection to its owner, it felt important, like it was meant to be returned." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Are you ready to see it?" I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. My hands trembled slightly as he placed the box on the table and slid it toward me. I stared at it for a long moment, gathering my courage, before finally picking it up and opening it. There it was, smaller than I remembered. Or perhaps my hands had grown larger with age. The gold was slightly dulled, but unmistakably the same band that Robert had slipped onto my finger 47 years ago. I carefully lifted it from the box, holding it between my thumb and forefinger, examining the inscription inside. Robert and Linda forever, June 1973. The engraving was still perfectly legible, preserved by the same water that had taken it from me. A flood of memories washed over me. Robert's face as he recited his vows, the way his hand trembled slightly as he placed this ring on my finger, the weight of it during those few months I wore it, the panic I felt when it slipped away. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. "Are you all right?" Jake asked gently. I nodded, opening my eyes and wiping away tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. "Yes, it's just seeing it again after so long. It feels like holding a piece of another life." "Would you like to try it on?" he asked. I looked down at my hands, the skin thinner now, veins more prominent, knuckles slightly swollen with arthritis. "I don't think it will fit anymore," I said with a small laugh. "I'm not the same size I was at 25. Still, I tried to slide it over my ring finger. As expected, it wouldn't go past the knuckle. Instead, I slipped it onto my pinky where it fit snugly. "Not quite the same," I said, "but close enough." I stared at the gold band on my smallest finger, this tangible piece of my past suddenly present again. It felt both familiar and strange, like running into an old friend you haven't seen in decades. The weight of it, the smooth texture of the gold. My body remembered these sensations even if my mind had filed them away. "Robert died, you know," I said suddenly, looking up at Jake. 2 months after I lost this ring. A car accident in November of 1973. We'd been married for 5 months. Jake's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. How could you?" I smiled sadly. When I lost the ring, it felt like a bad omen. And then when he died, I trailed off, shaking my head. For years, I tortured myself thinking if I hadn't lost the ring, maybe he would have lived. Irrational, I know. "Grief isn't rational," Jake said simply. "No, it isn't." I looked down at the ring again. I was 25 when he died. I've lived 47 years without him. Longer than he was alive. The mathematical reality of it struck me anew. Isn't that strange? To outlive the time someone existed by so many years, and all that time this ring was sitting at the bottom of the ocean. "It's humbling to think about," Jake agreed. "The ocean is constantly moving, but some things stay exactly where they are, waiting to be found." "I remarried," I told him, though he hadn't asked. "A good man named Thomas. We had 2 children together. Divorced after 20 years. I've had an entire life since I last saw this ring. Children, a career, grandchildren now." Jake smiled. The ring missed quite a lot. "It did," I laughed, grateful for his understanding. "And now here it is, back again, when I'm a completely different person than the one who lost it. Do you think there's a reason it came back now?" Jake asked. I considered the question. I don't know. I'm not someone who believes everything happens for a reason. But 47 years, it does make you wonder. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, both looking out at the ocean that had both taken and returned this small circle of gold. Then Jake spoke again. What will you do with it now? He asked. I haven't decided yet, I admitted. But I'd like to visit the beach where I lost it if you don't mind showing me the exact spot. Of course, Jake said, standing up. It's just down there, past the lifeguard tower. We paid for our coffees and walked down to the beach together. The sand was warm beneath my sandals, the air filled with the familiar scent of salt water and sunscreen. Families were scattered across the beach, children building sand castles and chasing waves. It looked different than it had in 1973. More development along the shore, different buildings on the cliffs above, but the ocean remained unchanged, eternal. Jake led me to a spot about 50 yards from shore, where the water was waist deep. It was right around here, he said. The sand shifts all the time with the currents, but this is approximately where I found it. I stood at the water's edge, looking out at the gentle waves. Somewhere out there, Robert and I had been swimming, laughing, in love. Somewhere out there, a wave had taken my ring, and a deeper current had carried it to the ocean floor, where it remained while I grieved, recovered, rebuilt, aged. And now it was back in my possession, a circle completed after 47 years. Thank you, Jake, I said, turning to the young diver. Not just for finding the ring, but for caring enough to find me, for understanding why it matters. It's been an honor, he said sincerely. Some finds are special. This is definitely one of them. We parted ways with a promise to stay in touch. Jake wanted to know what I eventually decided to do with the ring, and I promised to let him know. As I drove home, the velvet box secure in my purse, I felt lighter somehow, as if the return of the ring had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying after all these years. After meeting Jake, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I found myself driving to Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, where Robert was buried. I hadn't visited his grave in at least a decade, possibly longer. There had been a time when I went monthly, then yearly, then only on significant anniversaries. Eventually, life had moved on, and my visits became rare. I had to ask for help at the cemetery office to locate his grave, a fact that filled me with shame. How could I have forgotten where my husband was buried? The kind woman at the desk didn't judge me. She simply looked up the plot location and pointed me in the right direction. It happens more often than you'd think, she assured me. Especially after so many years. Robert's headstone was simple. Robert James Calloway, 1946 to 1973, beloved husband. No poetry, no religious symbolism, nothing to indicate the vibrant, complex person he had been. Just dates marking the brief span of his existence. 27 years, not even 3 decades on this earth. I knelt awkwardly beside the grave, my knees protesting the hard ground. In my hand, I held the velvet box containing the ring. Hello, Robert, I said softly. It's been a while. The cemetery was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and birds singing in the trees. I felt slightly foolish talking to a headstone, but I continued anyway. Something incredible happened. Our ring was found. After 47 years in the ocean, a diver found it and tracked me down. I opened the box and took out the ring, holding it up as if Robert could somehow see it. Remember how upset I was when I lost it? And you told me it was just a piece of metal, that it didn't matter as long as we had each other. I smiled at the memory. You were right, of course. But then I lost you too. And the ring became so much more important in my mind, like the last piece of our happiness that existed in the world. I traced the inscription with my finger. Forever, I said. We promised forever, and we got 5 months. It wasn't fair, Robert. It wasn't nearly enough time. The tears came then, surprising me with their intensity. I hadn't cried for Robert in years, had thought those tears were long since exhausted. But they flowed freely now, for the young man who never got to grow old, for the life we never got to build together, for all the might-have-beens that died with him on that rainy November night. I had another life after you, I told him, wiping my eyes. Not the one we planned, but a life. I hope you would have wanted that for me. I married a man named Thomas. He was kind and steady. Nothing like you, really. I laughed softly. We had 2 children, Michael and Sarah. You would have loved them. Sarah has your eyes, believe it or not. That same impossible blue. A genetic coincidence, I suppose. But sometimes when she looks at me a certain way, it takes my breath away. I told him about my career teaching elementary school for 35 years, about my 4 grandchildren, about the small house near the beach where I now lived alone. I told him about watching the world change over decades, about the internet and cell phones and how different everything was from the world we'd known together. The ring survived all of that at the bottom of the ocean, I said, looking at it gleaming in the sunlight. And now it's back, and I don't know what that means or what I'm supposed to do with it. I fell silent, half expecting an answer, some sign or revelation about why the ring had returned and what I should do next. But there was only the gentle breeze and distant sounds of life continuing around me. I sat by Robert's grave for a long time, holding the ring and reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had brought it back to me. The sunlight shifted, casting long shadows across the cemetery grounds. I thought about all the times I'd visited this place in those early years after Robert's death, how raw the grief had been then, how consuming. Now it was an old companion, familiar but no longer debilitating. You know, I said after a while, when I was young and in the depths of grief, I used to fantasize about growing old with you. I would imagine us with silver hair, sitting on a porch somewhere, watching our grandchildren play. It seemed so unfair that we would never have that. But now I'm the age I imagined us being together, and I've had that life, just not with you. I slipped the ring onto my pinky finger again, studying how it looked on my aged hand. I wonder who I would have been if you had lived. Would we still have been happy together? Would we have grown apart like Thomas and I did? Would I have become the same person I am now? These were questions without answers, paths that had closed nearly half a century ago. Yet the ring's return made them feel immediate again, as if time had somehow folded back on itself. I think the strangest part, I continued, is that I've now lived so much longer without you than with you. Our time together feels like a brief, bright flash in a very long journey. Sometimes I wonder if I've romanticized it because it was cut short. Maybe we wouldn't have been perfect forever. Maybe we would have had struggles and disappointments like any other couple. I looked down at the headstone, at the dates that encompassed Robert's entire life. But we never got the chance to find out. We never got to be ordinary together. Before leaving, I placed my hand on his headstone, feeling the cool, smooth marble beneath my palm. I'm not the same person who buried you, Robert. Grief changed me. Life changed me. But I've tried to live in a way that would make you proud. As I stood to leave, I was struck by how different this visit felt from those early ones. The pain was still there, but transformed into something gentler, more contemplative. I wasn't saying goodbye to Robert this time. I was acknowledging him as part of the complex tapestry of my life. The ring had brought him back into focus after years of being a faded background presence. I drove from the cemetery to the beach near my home in Santa Monica. It wasn't the same beach where I'd lost the ring, but the same vast Pacific stretched before it. I walked along the shoreline as the sun began to set, the ring now on a thin gold chain around my neck, a temporary solution until I decided what to do with it permanently. The beach was quieter now as evening approached. A few couples walked hand in hand, a jogger passed with a dog, children packed up sandcastles to head home for dinner. I found a secluded spot to sit and watch the waves roll in and out, an endless rhythm that had continued while empires rose and fell, while I loved and lost and lived and aged. 47 years underwater, waiting to come home, I whispered to myself, touching the ring that now hung at my chest. The ocean had kept my wedding ring safe longer than my marriage had lasted. There was something profound in that thought, something about permanence and impermanence that I couldn't quite articulate. As the sky turned from blue to pink to purple, I found myself thinking, not just about Robert and the ring, but about all the pieces of myself I had been over 72 years. The passionate young bride, the devastated widow, the dedicated teacher, the loving mother, the older woman sitting alone on a beach with a recovered treasure. All the same person, all different. Like the ring, fundamentally unchanged after decades underwater, yet altered by its journey. I wondered what to do next. The ring had returned, but what was I supposed to do with it? Keep it, give it away, return it to the sea? Each option felt significant in ways I couldn't fully explain. This small circle of gold had taken on meanings far beyond its physical reality. It was a symbol, a messenger, a time traveler. And now I had to decide its fate. As darkness fell, I made my way back to my car, still undecided but feeling strangely at peace. Whatever I chose to do with the ring, the miracle of its return had already worked something loose inside me. Some knot of grief or regret that had remained tightly wound despite the decades. The simple fact that it had survived, that it had found its way back to me after all this time, felt like a message from the universe. Some things endure, even when we think they're lost forever. For days after visiting Robert's grave, I carried the ring with me everywhere, sometimes on the chain around my neck, sometimes in the velvet box in my purse. I found myself touching it absent-mindedly throughout the day, a talisman from another life, both familiar and strange. I still hadn't decided what to do with it, but I knew the decision was important, not just practically, but symbolically. One evening, I called my daughter Sarah on video chat. Her face appeared on my iPad screen, her dark hair pulled back, Robert's blue eyes looking out at me from a face that otherwise resembled Thomas. She was in her Boston apartment, a stethoscope visible on the table behind her. She'd probably just returned from her shift at the hospital. "Mom, you look thoughtful. Is everything okay?" she asked. "I'm trying to decide what to do with the ring," I admitted. "It feels like a big decision." Sarah nodded. "It is a big decision. That ring has quite a story now." "I've been considering my options," I said. "I could wear it again, maybe on a chain since it doesn't fit my finger anymore. I could keep it in a safe place as a memento. I could even have it buried with Robert, though that would mean making arrangements with the cemetery." "What feels right to you?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle. I sighed. "That's just it. I'm not sure. Part of me wants to keep it close, as a connection to Robert and that time in my life. But another part wonders if that's living too much in the past." "You know," Sarah said after a moment, "when you first told me about the ring being found, I thought it was just a neat coincidence. But the more I think about it, the more remarkable it seems. That ring survived 47 years in the ocean and found its way back to you. That's pretty special, no matter what you believe about fate or signs." "It is special," I agreed. "That's why the decision feels so important." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What would Robert have wanted?" The question caught me off guard. Robert had been dead for so long that I rarely considered his preferences in my day-to-day decisions. But Sarah was right to ask. This was, after all, his ring too. "He was never particularly sentimental about objects," I said slowly. "When I lost the ring initially, he was the one who comforted me, saying it was just metal, that what mattered was our love, not the symbol of it." I smiled at the memory. He was very practical that way. "So maybe he wouldn't be too concerned about what happens to the ring," Sarah suggested. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But it matters to me." We talked a while longer, about Sarah's work and her upcoming visit, about my grandchildren and various family news. But the question of the ring hovered in my mind after we hung up. What would Robert have wanted? And more importantly, what did I want? Not just for the ring, but for myself at this stage of my life. The next morning, I woke early and went for my usual walk along the beach. The ring hung around my neck, warming against my skin as the day heated up. As I walked, I thought about all the years that had passed, all the events the ring had missed buried in the sand, my grief and recovery, my marriage to Thomas, the births of my children, the evolving world around us, right up to my present life as a 72-year-old woman walking alone on a beach. And suddenly I knew what I wanted to do. I called Michael first, then Sarah. I asked if they could both come visit the following weekend. I needed their help with something important. 5 days later, my son and daughter arrived at my house within hours of each other, Michael flying down from Seattle, Sarah coming in from Boston. We had dinner together, catching up on each other's lives. I didn't tell them my plan right away, wanting to enjoy this rare time with both my children together. The next morning, I asked them to come with me to Malibu Beach, the same beach where I had lost the ring 47 years ago, where Jake had found it earlier that year. I contacted Jake as well, and he agreed to meet us there, intrigued by what I had planned. It was a beautiful Saturday morning when we gathered on the shore. Jake brought his diving gear as I'd asked. After introductions and pleasantries, I finally told them what I had decided. I want to turn the ring into something new, I said, opening my hand to reveal the gold band. Something that acknowledges its past but gives it a new purpose. I explained that I had found a jeweler in Santa Monica who specialized in transforming old jewelry into new pieces. He had sketched several designs based on my story, and I had chosen one, a pendant in the shape of a wave, with the original gold from the ring melted and reformed. The inscription would be preserved, micro-engraved on the back of the pendant, along with a new date, April 2020, when the ring was found. Before I do that, though, I continued, I want to say a proper goodbye to the ring in its original form, and I want to thank the ocean for keeping it safe all these years. Jake nodded in understanding. You want to take it back to where it was found? Yes, I said. I'd like you to help me bring it full circle, to acknowledge where it's been before it becomes something new. Jake suited up in his diving gear while the four of us waded into the water. When we were about waist deep, approximately where Jake had found the ring, we formed a small circle. I held the ring up, catching the sunlight. This ring has lived 2 lives, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. First, as a symbol of love between 2 young people who thought they had forever. Then, as a survivor, hidden away in the depths while life continued above. I looked at my children, who were watching with tender expressions. Robert was not your father, but without him, I wouldn't be who I am, and you wouldn't be who you are. This ring connects all of us to that past, to the young woman I was, and the love I felt. I handed the ring to Jake. Would you take it down to where you found it, just for a moment, to complete its journey? Jake nodded and put on his mask. It would be my honor. We watched as he dove beneath the surface, disappearing into the blue water. Michael put his arm around my shoulders and Sarah held my hand. For a few minutes, we stood silently in the gentle waves, connected by this strange ceremony none of us had anticipated. When Jake resurfaced, he was smiling. He swam back to us and held out his hand. The ring sat in his palm, dripping with seawater. It's officially come full circle, he said. I took the ring, now wet and cold against my skin. Thank you, I said to Jake, then to the ocean itself. Thank you for keeping it safe, for returning it when the time was right. We made our way back to shore, and I carefully dried the ring and placed it in the velvet box for its final journey in this form. The following day, I would take it to the jeweler, where it would be transformed into something new, while preserving the essence of what it had been. As we walked back along the beach, Sarah linked her arm through mine. Are you sure about this, Mom? Changing the ring? I nodded. Some promises are eternal even when people aren't, I said. The ring in its original form belongs to a specific time and relationship. By transforming it, I'm acknowledging that life transformed me too. I'm not the same person who wore that ring, but I carry that person within me. The new pendant will reflect that, honoring the past while embracing the present. Michael smiled. I think it's perfect, Mom. Robert would approve. Yes, I agreed, surprised at how confident I felt in this decision now that I had made it. I think he would. The transformation of the ring affected my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. When I picked up the completed pendant from the jeweler 2 weeks later, I was struck by how perfectly it captured what I had wanted. A graceful wave shape in gleaming gold, with a small diamond embedded at the crest. A new addition that caught the light like sun on water. On the back, nearly invisible to the casual observer but known to me, were the original inscription and the date of the ring's return. I wore it every day, the weight of it against my chest a constant but gentle reminder of the past, present, and future all coexisting. People often commented on its unique design, giving me the opportunity to tell the story of the ring that spent 47 years underwater, though I usually kept the more personal details to myself. But the most significant impact came from the conversations it sparked with my family. My children had known about Robert, of course, but he had always been a vague figure in family lore, the husband who died young before they were born. The ring's return changed that. It made him real to them in a way he hadn't been before. One evening, Sarah called me specifically to ask more about him. "I realized I know almost nothing about Robert except that he died young," she said. "What was he like as a person?" So I told her. About his laugh that seemed to come from deep in his chest, about his love of science fiction books, about how he could fix almost anything mechanical but couldn't cook to save his life. I told her about our first date at a drive-in movie theater, about the time we got caught in a rainstorm and ended up dancing in the downpour, about his dream of someday designing bridges that would last for centuries. "He sounds wonderful," Sarah said when I finished. "I wish I could have known him." "In a way you do," I replied. "I carried him with me all these years. He helped shape who I became, and that shaped you." Michael was curious about Robert's death and how I had coped. His questions were more practical, more focused on the aftermath, exactly what I would have expected from my pragmatic son. "How did you keep going?" he asked during a phone call. "After such a loss at such a young age?" I thought about it. "One day at a time," I said finally. That sounds like a cliché, but it's the truth. There were days in the beginning when getting out of bed felt impossible. But I did it anyway. And then the next thing and the next. Eventually those days strung together into weeks, then months, then years. "Do you think finding the ring has helped you find closure after all this time?" he asked. "I'm not sure closure is the right word," I replied. The ring reminded me that nothing is ever truly lost, just transformed. The love I had with Robert didn't disappear when he died, or when I married your father. It changed shape, became part of the foundation of who I am. The ring coming back let me see that more clearly. Even Thomas, my ex-husband, called after hearing about the ring from our children. Our relationship had settled into a comfortable friendship over the years since our divorce. His call surprised me. "That's quite a story about the ring," he said. "The kids told me all about it." "Yes," I agreed. "Strange how life works sometimes." There was a pause before he said, "I always knew there was a part of you I couldn't reach, Linda. A part that belonged to him." I wasn't sure how to respond. Thomas and I had rarely discussed Robert during our marriage. It had seemed disrespectful to both men to make comparisons, or to dwell on my first husband while building a life with my second. "I'm sorry if that hurt you," I said finally. "Don't be," Thomas replied, his voice gentle. "We had a good run, a good family. I've never regretted our time together. I just wanted you to know that I understood. I always did." His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that," I whispered. After we hung up, I sat on my porch looking out at the distant ocean, thinking about how the ring's return had rippled through my relationships, bringing conversations that were decades overdue. Jake and I stayed in touch as well. He would occasionally send me photos of interesting items he found diving, none as meaningful as my ring, but all with their own stories. We met for coffee every few months, an unlikely friendship formed across generations through this strange connection. "I've been thinking about the ring a lot," he told me during one of these coffee meetings, "about how it survived all those years underwater." "What about it?" I asked. "Well, gold doesn't corrode, but it could have been lost in so many other ways, buried too deep to detect, swept out to sea by currents, picked up by someone else who didn't care about finding its owner. Against all odds, it stayed there, waiting." I smiled. "Are you getting philosophical on me, Jake?" He laughed. "Maybe a little, but don't you think it's pretty amazing? The ocean gave back what it took, even if it took 47 years. "Yes," I agreed, touching the wave-shaped pendant at my throat. "It is amazing." The pendant became my talisman, not just of Robert and our brief time together, but of resilience and transformation. When my first great-grandchild was born the following year, Sarah's daughter had a baby girl. I held the tiny infant with the gold wave resting against my chest, a reminder of how life continues, flows forward, brings new beginnings even as we carry our pasts with us. I took to visiting the beach more regularly, especially at sunset. I would stand at the edge of the water, watching the endless rhythm of waves rolling in and out, thinking about time and love, and the strange miracle of the ring's return. I found a peace in these moments that I hadn't known I was missing, a sense of everything being exactly as it should be, even the losses and griefs that had shaped my journey. I lost the ring and the man in the same year. 47 years later, the ring came back. Robert never would. But I had finally found a way to carry both the joy of having loved him and the pain of losing him as parts of a whole, neither diminishing the other. The ocean had taught me that some things return, some don't, but nothing is ever truly gone from the story of who we are. A year has passed since the ring came back to me. The wave pendant hangs around my neck as I write this, catching the late afternoon sun that streams through my living room window. Outside, the Pacific stretches to the horizon, the same ocean that held my ring for nearly half a century. I'm 73 now, with new lines on my face, and a fresh appreciation for the unexpected turns life can take, even in its later chapters. The pendant has become such a part of me that I rarely take it off. When people ask about it, and they often do, attracted by its unusual design, I tell them it was transformed from a wedding ring that spent 47 years underwater. Most assume it's just an interesting piece of jewelry with a made-up story attached. Only a few know its full significance, the complete journey from finger to ocean floor to wave-shaped memorial. Sarah visits more frequently now, her work having brought her to a hospital closer to California. She brought her daughter and granddaughter last month, 4 generations of women sitting together on my porch, watching the sunset. My great-granddaughter is just learning to walk, tottering uncertainly on chubby legs, falling and getting back up with the resilience of the very young. Watching her, I thought about the long arc of life, how I've been witness to so much beginning and ending, joy and sorrow, loss and recovery. Michael calls weekly, keeping me updated on his life in Seattle. He's planning to retire next year, talking about maybe moving back to California to be closer to family. Life's too short to be far from the people you love, he told me during our last conversation. I wonder if the ring's return influenced this decision, this renewed awareness of time's passage and the importance of connection. Last week, Jake took me diving, not deep underwater, but a simple snorkeling expedition just offshore from where he found the ring. At 73, I'm still strong enough to swim, though I tire more quickly than I used to. It was magical, floating above the seabed where my ring had rested for so long, watching fish dart among the underwater plants, feeling the gentle current rock me back and forth. The ocean from below is another world entirely, peaceful, vibrant, ancient. I understand now why Jake spends so much time beneath the waves, searching for lost treasures. The ocean kept my wedding ring safe longer than my marriage lasted. I told him afterward as we sat on the beach, drying in the sun. Longer than Robert was alive. There's something profound in that. Jake nodded. The ocean works on a different timescale than we do. Decades are nothing to it. And yet, it gave the ring back at exactly the right moment, I said. When I could receive it not with fresh grief, but with perspective. I've come to believe that the ring's return wasn't random, wasn't just an interesting coincidence. I don't know if I believe in fate or divine intervention or some cosmic organizing principle, but I do believe the ring came back to me when I was ready to receive it properly, when I could see it not just as a reminder of loss, but as a testament to endurance. In many ways, the ring's journey paralleled my own. We both spent decades being shaped by forces greater than ourselves, the ring by water and sand, me by grief and love and time. We both emerged changed, but essentially intact. The gold of the ring became a wave. The young bride I was became the older woman I am. Different forms, same essence. Forever meant 47 years apart, and one moment reunited. It wasn't the forever Robert and I promised each other on our wedding day, the lifetime of growing old together that we envisioned. But it was a different kind of forever. The kind that transcends physical presence, that lives in memory and transformation, in the ways someone touches your life even after they're gone. Sometimes, in the soft light of early morning when the boundary between dreams and waking is thinnest, I imagine Robert as he would be now, a man in his 70s with silver hair and laugh lines, his blue eyes faded but still bright. I imagine us growing old together in parallel to the life I actually lived. It's not painful anymore, this imagining. It's just another tributary of the river of my life, a path not taken but still somehow part of the whole. The ocean gave back what it took, but it took so much more than it could ever return. A ring, yes, but not Robert's laugh, not his touch, not the life we would have built together. Yet in returning the ring, the ocean gave me something new, a reminder that love doesn't sink, it only changes form. It waits, preserved in memory and meaning, until the moment comes to resurface in unexpected ways. Tonight, I'll walk on the beach as the sun sets, the wave pendant warm against my skin. I'll thank the ocean again for its strange gift, for the lesson it taught me about time and permanence and transformation. And I'll think of Robert, not with the sharp ache of fresh grief or the dull throb of old pain, but with gratitude for the brief, bright love we shared and for all the ways it continues to shape my journey, even 48 years after the waves took him from me. Some promises are eternal, even when people aren't. The ring proved it. Have you ever lost something precious and had it returned years later? Do you believe the ocean kept this ring safe for 47 years for a reason? Leave your comment below. Subscribe for more incredible true stories. Share if you believe in destiny and signs from the universe.